ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into part 3 of the series What If Deku Let His Emotions Take Over Him. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. What is our next move? The air was thick as the Utada staff sat in utter silence, the question that Toshinori had raised going unanswered. Aizawa's eyes scanned the room, looking to his fellow heroes. Even he had no answer to Toshinori's question. What else is there to do? We find another lead. Midnight spoke up, her voice carrying itself with a steel edge. Her eyes brimmed with fresh tears, yet they were filled with a resolute gaze. Another lead? We were lucky to even capture Toga. Besides, now it's certain that Red Hood is hunting the League. He openly attacked a police station in order to get to her. The League is going to be on guard. They won't make any rash moves. Hell, even before Red Hood made an example out of Toga, they laid low. What do you think is going to happen now? Vlad shook his head, staring at Namuri. What he said was anything but a lie. We have no other choice, Vlad. We put out more patrols. They can't stay hidden forever, and if there's a chance we can save Midoriya, we have to take it. Aizawa, what did Naomasa say? Mike turned to Aizawa, the man closing his eyes as he recalled what he had been told. It had been a day after Toga had been taken by the Red Hood. Aizawa sat in Naomasa's office. In the detective's hands a paper rested. Please tell me you got something from Toga, Naomasa. Aizawa, you and I both know how my quirk is used. To tell if someone is lying, they would have to know the truth. Naomasa cut the song and dance. He was in no mood to hear anything about this. I used my quirk on Toga. During your questioning, I heard every word spilled from her mouth. Concerning the League's whereabouts and their plans, she told the truth. However, regarding the disappearance of Izuku Midoriya, she was lying? Aizawa's heart jumped for a split second before Naomasa shook his head. She was neither lying, nor was she telling the truth. What does that mean? Aizawa stood up, grabbing Naomasa's collar. She doesn't know. She doesn't know if Izuku is dead? How the hell can she not know? Either she wasn't aware of the League holding Midoriya captive, which isn't likely, or Midoriya never died in that warehouse. We've talked about this over and over. There were no remnants of any limbs or a corpse. I put my best forensics teams on the case and nothing. That was when the suspicion that Midoriya's death might have been faked started. Aizawa listened closely, his grip on Naomasa's collar dropping. Aizawa, I'm your friend. As of right now, you are the only person I will tell this to. Waging war with the illegal trade, attacking a police station for a single person. That isn't what we call dedication, especially for a vigilante. He was targeting Toga. Of course, there are plenty of individuals who would seek revenge against her and the League, but going this far. What are you trying to say? Naomasa braced himself, leaning against his desk. I think that Midoriya could possibly be the Red Hood. The last line repeated in his head a multitude of times, and staring at the disfigured and mutilated body of Toga, he couldn't help but think. He said he hesitated, not sure what to say. He wasn't sure, but what Naomasa said stuck with him. Izuku had every reason to hunt the League. Avenging his mother, revenge for the torture he was subjected to. Still, he didn't want to believe the vigilante they had been hunting was Izuku. Turning to Namuri, he locked eyes with the woman. It would kill her to find out. He said Toga was lying. Izuku is still alive and is being held captive. As for the League's whereabouts and their plans, that was all true. He lied, knowing what harm it could do further down the line. Still, he imagined it was better to give false hope than to tell them something even he didn't quite believe. Well, there we have it. Nizu spoke from his chair. Going forward, we need to up our patrols within the Mizutafu and Narwada district. Take reports from civilians and set up a call center down at the precinct for any information pertaining to Red Hood. Perhaps those who reported in Toga's body can provide more information. Hound Dog, I want you to go to crime scene, see if you can pick up any scent. Maybe it'll trace back to where Toga was held by Red Hood. The rest of you keep your patrol routes. Still, remember, classes are still in session, so adjust your hours accordingly. Now please leave. I need to make some phone calls. The meeting ended. The chairs shuffled with Namuri standing up last. Aizawa, you coming? She looked to her friend, her hand resting on his shoulder. No, I got something to ask Nizu. You go ahead. I'm sure Eri is waiting for you. Namiri said nothing. Her gaze lingered on Aizawa for a few seconds before she left, wondering how she was going to explain this to the others. Aizawa watched her leave before standing in silence waiting. Aizawa, is there a reason for you to remain in the room? Nizu's beady eyes looked to Aizawa, the man returning his look. Nizu, I need the files and recordings of Class 1A prior to Midoriya's disappearance. May I ask why? Aizawa shook his head. It's not something I can say without being sure of. Alright, the files you'll need are in my office, bottom drawer of my desk. As for the files of the recordings, I'll send them to you in a few short minutes. Though I like to think it goes without saying that anything you find I want to know. Of course. Aizawa nodded, leaving the room, heading directly to Nizu's office. He had to be sure. He wouldn't blindly follow Naomesa's suspicions, but he wouldn't ignore them either. Entering Nizu's office, Aizawa walked behind the principal's desk before opening the bottom drawers, seeing a large selection of files. Sorting through the files, Aizawa found the 1A section, which had been categorized by the years. Grabbing Izuku's file, he left the rest alone, having already grabbed what he needed before he left, heading to his own office. Once there, Aizawa locked the doors and closed the blinds. Turning on a small desk lamp, he placed the file down only to open up his continue and pull up the videos emailed to him. It was hard to see the face of a once lively Izuku, and it was even harder to imagine that such a boy would be a ruthless and cold-blooded individual. Letting out a sigh, he pressed play. He watched from the very beginning. Izuku's quirk assessment test. At the time, Aizawa didn't think such a hopeless person could ever become a hero. A chuckle came from his mouth. He had been a fool for thinking this in the first place. Aizawa-sensei, I did it. The video played the footage loudly. Izuku grinning in pain as he held his broken finger in a tight fist. Watching this moment again caused Aizawa's chin to tighten. He had seen a bright future in Izuku's eyes that day. A future where the boy had been destined to do what All Might once thought possible and create a true era of peace. Shaking his head, Aizawa watched the rest of the videos. He watched Izuku grow as a person, as a hero. Then he saw it. The same day, everything went to hell, and the first time he had seen red lightning. It was unmistakable. Taking a breath, Aizawa opened his desk cabinet, grabbing files dating back to Red Hood's first appearance. Opening the files, he hoped he was wrong. Reading the files, he noted the eyewitness accounts of Red Hood. All of them recorded the same distinct trait. Red lightning. No, it was just a coincidence. Several people had similar quirks. This was just one of these instances. Grabbing Izuku's file, he looked to the boy's quirk description. Enhanced strength and speed. Frantically, he scrubbed through the files before stopping on the report made by Mirko and Gang Orca. Red Hood covered himself in red lightning, after which his strength and speed outclassed ours. He broke my sound wave with a launch of air. He targeted my legs. He knew our weaknesses. The last line brought Aizawa to his fight with Red Hood. The vigilante knew how his quirk worked, knew how he fought, knew his weaknesses. Aizawa thought of Izuku's notebooks. Diving into his desk, he pulled out said notebooks. Flipping through the pages, he searched until he found the page on him. Shoto Aizawa. Quirk, Erasure. If fighting against Eraserhead, targeting the eyes are the first priority. With his lengthy build, hand-to-hand fighting is not advised. He's skilled in various martial arts, utilizing his scarf, which is used to throw his opponents off balance and or capture them, avoided at all costs. The entire page detailed how exactly to take him down, what to avoid, what to target. It was exactly what Red Hood had done during their fight, like it was practiced over and over again. Putting the notebook away, he turned back to the files on Red Hood. Continuing to read, Aizawa carried on. Red Hood took an attack meant for Nijire, and even when he had his gun pointed at the girl, he refused to shoot. Red Hood had defeated heroes before, and Nijire should have been no different, and he shouldn't have been either, or Namiri for that matter. Both at the police station and on the roof, Aizawa had been blind, and if his strength was enough to take on Mirko and Gang Orca, he should have been dead. Namiri too, but he didn't. Red Hood would know that they would keep getting in his way, so why wouldn't he get rid of them? That was unless he didn't want to. Why would a ruthless vigilante keep them alive? People who were close to Izuku. It didn't make sense. Not unless it was true. There was no body. Toga didn't even know if he was really dead. He refused to finish us. He was hunting the League. Everything pointed to one irrefutable answer. Aizawa placed his head in his hands, his mouth opening, as in a pained voice he spoke. Izuku, you're the Red Hood. I knew it. Spinner placed his head onto the cold wooden bar top of the stray sheep, a bar that the villain had been frequenting often. His eyes looked to the TV sat right behind the bar, his vision taking the dismembered figure of Toga, her death still the only thing the news would talk about even after 3 days. Tears sprung to the lizard villain's eyes. His right hand grabbing the glass of whiskey sat before him. Taking a chug, his head sunk lower. This was divine punishment. Punishment for what they had done. I'm sorry, he choked out an apology. The face of the mother and son he had lived clouding his mind. He knew it was wrong at the time, yet he did nothing to stop it. He watched as they raped and tortured a poor woman, watched as they slit the throat of a boy's mother in front of his eyes. He sat by as the League tortured a boy who was only a few years younger than him. This wasn't who he wanted to be. He just wanted to follow his idol's ideology, but what he did, clenching his fists, Spinner shook his head. For months he had been begging for his death. He more than deserved to burn in hell. He may have not done those terrible things, but he was just as guilty for doing nothing. Another one slurring out a request. Spinner looked to the bartender, shaking his empty glass. He didn't exactly remember when he started appreciating the taste of alcohol, but now it was all he could drink. He would drink to forget, but he would only end up remembering. Waiting, he felt his glass slowly fill with liquid, and the second the steady flow stopped, he brought the glass to his lips. Chugging the viscous liquid down, he slammed the glass on the top before standing absent-mindedly, throwing a few stray dollars onto the counter before he stumbled his way out the bar. The cold night air and its rain pelted him heavily as soon as he stepped foot outside. Not bothering to cover his face, he wandered the streets of Naruhata's red light district. Despite this location being Red Hood's most active hunting ground, he didn't care. If the vigilante caught him, then he was dead. Maybe that was for the best. He wished the entire League like Toga had been found. There was no redemption for what they did, and knowing the League, they wouldn't want such redemption even if they were given a chance. Hey, looking for a good time? Spinner stopped staring at the prostitute who propositioned him, a chuckle coming from his throat. Good time. He mocked in his head. There was nothing good. Not about him. Not who he was. Waving the girl off, he continued his walk. His doubled vision making it harder to do so. His mind kept recalling the image of Toga, especially the banner. Who's next? A good question, one he wished he could answer for the Red Hood. At this point, which one of them didn't deserve death? They were all monsters in human skin. Looking up at the sky, Spinner closed his eyes. Maybe there was only one thing he could do. This would put a crosshair on his back, but at this point he had no other option if he was going to die. He would rather go out doing one last good thing. Looking to the street, Spinner raised his hand. Taxi. Calling out a car stopped, and getting in he said one thing. Take me to U.A. Why can't you be normal? Himiko's eyes looked to the terrified expression her mother wore. Her mother's face twisted in horror, mouth agape, feet shifting unsteadily. Despite this, she could only focus on the liquid that filled her mouth courtesy of the corpse she held with her teeth. The elongated canines she had been born with seeped with warm liquid. Stop it with that creepy smile. Her father screamed, his voice filled with both disgust and horror. Yet again the words of her parents fell on deaf ears. It had been like this since her quirk awakened. Therefore she was all too used to this sort of welcome. Why can't you be normal? Absently did she think of the first time that line was spoken to her. Turning her head, Himiko's eerie yellow eyes gazed into the reflection before her. Maybe if she was normal, she would still have a family. Maybe she would have finished school, fell in love, had kids. Just maybe if she was normal, she wouldn't have ended Inko Midoriya's life. But that doesn't justify what they have done. Staring into her reflection, Himiko's vision warped, the clear glass becoming a glossy red surface. Her body lacerated, cuts running across the broken shell that she couldn't even move anymore. It was odd. She had never regretted her actions until this very moment. Her tear-filled eyes looked to the man, her victim, Izuku Midoriya. There were few words she could speak at this moment. Please unalive me. She wanted the pain to end. The more she waited for death, the longer she was forced to sit through her memories. The way she dug into a poor, defenseless woman's flesh, the cries of pain as she yanked the woman's forest green hair, and the pleas of that woman to not violate the only being of her creation. He knew how she must have suffered. Izuku didn't speak a word to the pleas of the monster before him. He only walked towards the shrill voice in his ears, his boots colliding with the floor beneath with nothing but a squelch. The foul-smelling liquid underneath rippling. the scrunching of his right glove reverberating off the walls as they took hold of the contoured grip of his knife. With a click did the sheath allow the blade to be drawn. The silver edge glinted in the light for a fraction of a second before the tip was placed underneath its chin, drawing vital fluid almost immediately. The monster's cries becoming increasingly irritating before he forcefully stopped them, his left hand gripping the hole of which the noises originated from roughly. For a second, he closed his eyes only to open them with only a seething hatred. But he didn't care. Forcefully did he push his right hand upward. There was no haste, only a slow and torturous process as the volume of vital fluid increased. The squirming that the thing attempted only causing it even greater pain. Pain that he enjoyed inflicting, yet had quickly become dissatisfied at the mercy he was showing it. It deserved far worse than this, however, he didn't have the luxury of doing so. After all, this thing belonged to a pack. Still, he took time to focus his hearing. Flesh being torn, separated slowly with sounds of ripping. Eyes watching a new orifice being created by his own hands. The new hole stretching unnaturally as he tugged and twisted. The blade of his knife growing bigger and bigger as he pushed upward even more. What would have taken just seconds extended to minutes. Soon it came to an end with a harsh yank downward, cutting any loose hanging flesh without a shred of hesitation. With a clink did his knife find a resting place on the metal tray filled with surgical supplies, all of which were covered in vital fluid as well. With his left still stopping a majority of the noises from escaping, the responsibility fell on his newly free right hand to continue. There were no reservations as he dug his hand into the open wound, fingers grasping the wriggling appendage inside before he made his way to exit, and following behind was Toga's tongue. Though he had accomplished his initial goal, his heart said otherwise, and with his head taking the passenger seat, he listened to his beating chest. Letting go of its mouth, he then heard her muffled shrieks of dread. Soon they would be silenced forever, and with both hands he grasped its face, hands almost caressing it before he raised his thumbs towards the shimmering yellow eyes. Mom. Inko was at the forefront of his mind, and her image was enough to drive his thumbs forward. Without mercy and remorse did he split the slitted pupils of the thing before him, the pressure he emitted crushing the iris and sclera into mush. Even with the violent thrashing shaking his arms did he push farther and farther, lightning coating his body while the pressure increased, vital fluid flowing from the sides of the monster's sockets. Among the thrashing there was a loud pop, and then the result was apparent. The thrashing stopped, and as his hands left did its head fall as though it had been lacking any form of support. His hands covered in stains, Izuku rubbed them through his hair, finally taking a deep breath, fingers grasping onto locks of his hair before he let out a small growl. None of his actions had done anything to alleviate the feeling that still swirled in his chest. Every last one. The taxi ride was quiet as no words were exchanged within the vehicle. Both Spinner and the driver were in no mood to converse. Spinner was far too preoccupied watching the raindrops that landed on the window cascade off with great speed. His mind for the first time in a while was calm. Perhaps he should have been anxious, maybe even fearful. After all, he had seen just how far Shigaraki had fallen. Actually, it was something he had known for a while, ever since they had unalived Izuku and Inko Midoriya. At the time, there wasn't even a plan. There wasn't any discussion, rather it was all decided by a whim. A message. That was nonsense, and he had known it. Once it had dragged out to full-blown torture, did it truly stop being a message? I should have stopped it. He should have done something when they violated Inko in front of her own son. He should have stopped them when they threatened an innocent girl who didn't even know who they were. For a moment, Toga's death resurfaced in his mind. Maybe was it so wrong to say that they deserved what Toga had gotten? No, for what they did we deserve worse. The words were no louder than a whisper, thus failing to catch any attention. Clenching his right hand, Spinner lightly hit the seat next to him. He deserved death, and maybe he was foolish for thinking of repentance. Still, if he exposed the League's next moves as he knew them, then maybe he had a chance to be redeemed, if only slightly. Propping his head with a hand under his chin, he looked at the passing streetlights. He sat completely still before the taxi came decreased in speed. Within clink, the meter of the taxi came to rest, the fare showing in a bright orange. That'll be $26.50. Spinner didn't contest, and only pulled from his wallet all the cash he had left on them. With $300 in his hand, he handed the entire stack over. There was no reason for him to hold on to it anymore. Call it his final act against Shigaraki and his first attempt to wash his hands clean. Not waiting for the cab driver to process his actions, Spinner left the vehicle, falling to the large concrete staircase in front of him. There was no going back. What kind of hero do you want to be? A fresh cold breeze blew past Aizawa, the man looking towards the forested area just a few feet away. By his side, a young hero shifted uneasily at the question, their forest green hair pushed by the wind and emerald eyes searching for an answer. They both sat on one of the many outdoor benches built in U.A's large campus. This scene alone was not an isolated incident, as they had done this many times before, asking questions, talking to one another, and although reluctant to admit it, enjoying this time. He would never say it, but he felt as though he had someone who he could finally leave his legacy to. As such, he patiently waited for his student to answer. To want to be like All Might. It was the same answer he had heard so many times before, but unlike the first time, he didn't feel any frustration, especially by Izuku's next words. That's what I thought, but after Eri I realized. Izuku took a moment, his eyes looking to the bright sky. I want to be a hero who can protect the people I care about, no matter the cost. I know I won't always be able to, but I want to try, even if that means giving up my life for them. Aizawa's mouth formed a small grin. His student's eyes were resolute. No matter what he said now, it was a fact Izuku would never change his mind. Not that would discourage this, get better control of your quirk. His response had caught Izuku off guard, but patting the boy on the back, he continued, then maybe you can become that hero. The memory played in his head while he fought the truth. What was he supposed to do now? Oh no. His hands swiped across his desk, scattering the files before him, while simultaneously knocking his desk lamp to the floor, the bulb shattering, leaving him in darkness. This can't. Slamming his fist onto his desk, Aizawa's vision was obscured by his hair. He wanted to deny that the trail of bodies Red had left in his wake was in actuality his student's own doing. He wanted to say it wasn't possibly Izuku, it couldn't be. But there was no mistaking it. The student he failed to save, the one he cared for as his own kin, was the same one who brutally executed those who stood in his way. He's still following his goal. He was protecting the people he cared about no matter the cost. Red Hood, Izuku, will not stop until he accomplishes his goal. Thus Aizawa's options were limited. Racking his options, Aizawa took a deep breath. Option number 1. Reveal what he knows to Nizu. That would mean bringing this information to the Hero Association, which would ultimately result in the subsequent manhunt that would naturally follow. Izuku would never have a chance of returning, and if when he is jailed, he would never see Eri again. Option number 2. Reveal nothing and rely on any information that comes from the streets to narrow down Izuku's whereabouts. He could try and sway Izuku from walking the path he was currently heading towards. That way he might be able to return back to normalcy. But would he actually be able to do it? Izuku's will was unwavering to a fault, and if he got in the way, was he sure Izuku wouldn't kill him? Or option number 3. Aizawa closed his eyes, fists clenching into a tight ball for even considering this as a solution. But if Izuku wouldn't stop, if he would continue to kill, continue to massacre his way towards the League, the girls nor Eri would be able to handle it once his stained identity is out for the world to see. Before that happens, Aizawa would rather have Izuku die as the hero in training Deku, the father of Eri, as a student of U.A, and as a son by his own hands. Anything but the martyr Red Hood. Mizuta Fu, Narahata, Tokyo, Hosu, Fukuoka, the list went on and on. The cities that made up Japan varied, and all had their own problems. Villain attacks, petty crimes, homelessness, each carried statistic, all except this one. Dika City. It makes no sense. Izuku sat within one of the many late-night cafes that littered Dika City. His appearance masked, long baggy clothes fitted over his body and armor, while his hair was kept hidden by an all-black hat. Did she lie? No, I would have known, but why here? His mind swirling in a never-ending spiral. Call it a gift or a curse, but Izuku had great memory recall, and he could draw what exactly Toga had said moments before he finished her. S. Shigaraki deal D. Dika. By then the only other thing she could do was beg for death. Still, those 3 words were enough to drive him toward this place. Now that he was here, however, his confusion only grew as time passed. He had spent the last 2 hours roaming the night streets. Yet there was nothing. Dika City was renowned for having the lowest crime rate and number of villain attacks year-round. But isn't this a little too much? No crime at all was weird, too weird. And if there was some deal going on between the League of Villains and another group, wouldn't it be better to connect to a pre-established one like Overhaul and the Yakuza? Lost in thought, Izuku was only brought out of his head when the waitress of the cafe spoke to him. "Hi, sir. Would you like another cup?" Looking to his right hand that held his coffee, Izuku blinked. He hadn't even registered he'd been drinking it the entire time. Sure, thank you." Handing his cup to the woman, he turned his head to the T.V just behind the bar counter. Due to the late hour, all it showed was a rerun of events that happened throughout the day, and with the volume loud enough to hear his attention, was brought to an interview. "Hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm Chitose Kazuki, your host for the evening." A pale blue-skinned woman bowed her head, her lilac-colored hair swaying as she did so ever so slightly. Izuku had heard of the woman before, but as the camera panned out, he was struck with confusion about her guest. It was slim man, hair brown, hairline receding, yet he was clearly important. Even Izuku could see that with the suit the man wore. Here with me today is the CEO of the Detnerat Company, Rikiya Yatsubashi. As Chitose introduced her guest, a loud round of applause rang throughout the area. Much more than one would normally expect for a live interview show. "Yatsubashi-sama." Many in the crowd cheered. During this, the man known as Rikiya only gave off a hearty chuckle and a smile. He was charismatic, that was no mistake, and with charisma, surely winning a crowd over was easy, but Izuku could put his finger on it. What he was hearing seemed more like worship than some simple diehard fans. As he thought this, he heard the waitress give out a content sigh. "Hi, Yatsubashi-sama," she said his name with reverence. Seemingly catching Izuku's gaze on her, the woman shyly blushed before speaking. "Sorry about that, sir. Here, your coffee." Placing the coffee back on the small plate, Izuku had the waitress turn back, intent on watching the interview a bit more before Izuku interrupted. "Sorry, is it all right if I ask you a question? You see, I'm actually from northern Hokkaido, and I came down here to visit the area, so I don't really know much. I was wondering if you can tell me who he is?" Izuku pointed to the screen and at Rikiya. "Sure thing." The waitress spoke with glee as though it was an honor to brag about the man. This only drew more suspicion. "Yatsubashi-sama is a great man. His company Detnerat has been a help to us who live in Dika." The woman went on a tirade about the Detnerat Company, a company that exclusively made lifestyle equipment for regular quirk users, most of the equipment being the same quality as hero equipment. She kept talking about how Rikiya improved the lives of the citizens, his donations helping to rebuild Dika City from the ground up. It went on, from his appearances in media to appearing at charity events held in the city and many more. All in all, Rikiya was a very good man. Eventually it ended, but he learned a lot from this interaction, and the more he learned, the more he became suspicious. Sure, he believed in goodwill, but someone this good was bound to have more than a few skeletons in their closet. "So, Hokkaido, long way from home, aren't you, sir?" The waitress didn't allow Izuku any freedom to think, quickly switching up the topic. "Yeah, that's right. If you don't mind me asking, what made you visit Dika City? Why not Mizudafu or Jaku? Do you have family in the area?" It was a bombardment of questions, and Izuku could feel the waitress's gaze strongly, sizing him up in a way. No family. As for why, well, I heard Dika City was the cleanest and safest place in Japan. After what you told me, I'm sure it's true. So you haven't been here long?" "Nope, just drove into town actually." Izuku gave off a smile, eyes drifting to the large black duffel bag that lay near his feet. "Still haven't gotten a hotel, yet are there any places you recommend near the Detnerat office?" Hearing all about it bumped it to the top of the places I would like to visit. The waitress smiled. "Well, there are a few." Scribbling a few names on a page of the small notepad she carried, the waitress then handed the list to Izuku. He knew she was a local, but this spoke volumes to how tight-knitted this city was. "I should tread lightly," taking the list. He then placed $20 on the counter. "Keep the change. Thank you for the help." With a small wave, Izuku walked out of the cafe, taking his duffel bag with him. Turning the corner, he walked towards the largest tower in the city. In his hands was the list given to him. There were too many things for him to ignore. Rikiya was a suspicious man, and if he were really in bed with the League. Izuku's fist balled up tightly. No matter how much he may have helped this city, Rikiya would die beside those monsters. Taking his mind off the what-ifs, he continued his walk, again in the eerie silence of a seemingly sleeping city. It was unnerving, and Izuku could help but scan the area. Yet his guard proved useless as he arrived at one of the named hotels without issue. The name was unimportant. Rather, its appearance was what Izuku judged the place on. It wasn't fancy by any means, but it wasn't a Motel 6 either. It'll work. It was a comfortable middle ground. Turning, he entered the hotel room, and after a quick chat with the receptionist, he found himself standing within the hallway of the top floor. In his hand was a key, and attached was a small brass-painted keychain with a number engraved 705. Entering his room, Izuku quickly saw what one would expect in a hotel such as this. However, he was not here to bask in the luxuries provided. Instead, he got straight to work. Heading to the nearest window, Izuku closed all the blinds, leaving only one slightly open. Setting his bag down, he moved the alone chair that sat in the corner in front of the window. Once that was done, he proceeded to throw the sheets and blankets off the mattress of the bed before lifting the mattress. Turning it so it faced upward, he propped the large piece of furniture against the door of the room. No one in and no one out. Finally, he turned to his duffel bag. Unzipping the bag, Izuku lay witness to several large metal parts. Magazines of ammo, many too large for his regular pistols, though that was the point. Taking the metal parts out, he began his work. Sliding large bars into place until they clicked in place, he slowly began to put together what looked to be a camera stand. However, the legs of which were far heavier than any common camera stand. After the legs were in place in front of his chair, he dug into his bag once more. Clicks were all that could be heard. Izuku slapping together a large contoured handle into a large metal frame. A large barrel screwing into the front of the very same frame. Slowly did the tedious process, he forced himself into take shape. Connected to the stand was a Barrett M82, a long-forgotten relic of the past. Yet despite its age, it has not lost its luster. Loading a large mag filled with black-tipped armor-piercing 50 cal cartridges. Adjusting the stand to have the scope of the rifle to his eye, the boy took a minute to properly establish the distance between his window and the entrance to Detonarat building. It was a long shot, he knew. Rikia could be innocent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that crawled up his spine. He had learned to never go against his instinct, not after that day. When his sight became clear, the boy leaned back, his hands going to his bag once more. Plucking out his helmet that had been wrapped in his leather jacket, the boy stood up, shedding his disguise. Slipping on the jacket, he then stared at his helmet. Taking a deep breath, he placed his head inside before taking his seat. He wouldn't be getting sleep at least for a few days. A sigh escaped his lips, head turning to look at the time. 4 a.m. Namiri read to herself, her eyes looking to her bedside clock, her once lively sky blue eyes now sporting a vivid cloudiness. Again she was hit with a nightmare, and like every other time it was the same thing. Watching Izuku get tortured in front of her very eyes. One would have figured she would have gotten used to it after months of having them, but not her, she couldn't. The moment she did, she feared her love for the boy would fade. That was the last thing she wanted. Turning her head, Namiri stared at the ceiling, right arm raising to rest on her forehead. Her left arm still preoccupied by the weight snuggling deep into her side. She glanced, and relief hit her like a train. At least Eri was with her. She couldn't have imagined going through this without the girl. She was the sole reason she even returned from her patrols. With her left hand, she played with the small child's hair. Said child sleeping peacefully. Izuku, she whispered his name, wishing that in this very moment he was with the both of them. Here where he belongs. Namiri stared at Eri's sleeping face before she let a bit of her quirk seep from her right hand. Gently, Eri let go of the purple nightgown she wore, falling into a deeper sleep. Free from the embrace of the small girl, Namiri sat up, moving to the edge of her bed. Slowly she left the warmth of her covers and headed towards the private bathroom that came with every teacher's room. Entering, she turned on the light, temporarily blinded before her eyes slowly adjusted to the lights above her. Once they did, she stepped inside, locking the door behind her before she stood in front of the mirror. There she gazed upon herself. Gone was the face that had been free of blemishes for so many years. Across her nose ran a long, dark scar which continued until it rested underneath her left eye. Her slender fingers brushed against the skin before moving to the scar on the left side of her heart-shaped lips. It was small in comparison with the other, but nonetheless it was yet another reminder of what she lost. Of course, these scars were only two examples. There were many others which she earned the same way these ones had been. It wasn't wrong for Aizawa to have said she was out of control. fighting villains who she would never deal with on her own, but I couldn't just sit there and hope for him to come back. Namuri gripped the sink, her left hand going to turn on the water. The woman was not naive. She knew that just waiting like a princess in distress wouldn't bring him back. She was first and foremost a hero who Izuku could rely on, a hero who wouldn't give up so easily. It wouldn't have been fair to sit back while Izuku endured, and it wouldn't have been fair to herself to break down. At least that's what she made herself think. Taking her eyes off the mirror for but a moment, Namuri splashed a handful of warm water over her face, her disheveled hair falling over her face as her head lowered back. Her body shook, and through pursed lips a shaky breath came from the woman. The water droplets that fell off her face were joined by more as Namuri's breathing remained unsteady. Slowly her grip on the sink fell, and she slid to the floor, her knees hitting the tile. Izuku, she whimpered his name. Although she had forced herself to think many things, there was a point where even her strength fell. I should have been there. Anger was all she could feel, her teeth biting at her quivering lips, and this anger was towards herself. Although there was no possible way in any reality for her to have known when and where Izuku was taken, it didn't provide any comfort to her. There were no excuses. She should have just known. She should have known something was wrong. Hero her arse, she was a failure, she couldn't even save him. Tears dripped down Namuri's face, though she stifled them with her right hand. Crying wouldn't solve anything, but there was no helping it. She just couldn't hold them in any longer, and this was the only time she could even think to let them loose. Eri, her colleagues, the students, she couldn't let them see her like this. Not after she had failed him. For a few minutes Namuri didn't move an inch. She only let her stifled cries continue until she ran out of tears and her skin became red with irritation. Taking a few deep breaths, Namuri started to pick herself off the ground when a loud alarm sounded. Everywhere and all at once, the Udata campus was assaulted by the blaring noises of sirens. Quickly Namuri got to her feet and exited the bathroom, swiftly her eyes going straight towards her bed. There Eri sat on the bed, eyes clearly in a panic, hands covering her ears. Rushing to her daughter's side, Namuri hugged the girl to her chest until the alarms quieted. Though that didn't stop much of the noise as a small bracelet which sat on the besides dresser rang. Picking it up, she read the message that displayed an emergency alert. This small bracelet was only made after Izuku's disappearance in the event something similar to what happened to the boy occurred. It was a convenient piece of equipment, but there was no time to compliment it. Tapping the bracelet, Namuri looked to the location the alert came from. U.A's main gate. Knowing where she was supposed to go, Namuri let go of Eri. Eri, stay here, okay? Mama will be right back. Don't open the door for anyone, okay? Placing the girl back under the covers, Namuri saw the little girl nod, her eyes shining much like Izuku's would. Reassured, Namuri ran towards her door, swiping a jacket on her way out, slipping it on before locking the door behind her. Her run did not cease for a moment. Although she had none of her equipment, Namuri was ready for a fight. Her focus was on one thing only. All the other useless trash like doubt can wait. Running, she stopped when she spotted several of the other teachers standing at the gate, their eyes searching the area. Hound dogs sniffing the air, trying in vain to pick up a scent of any other intruder. Due to Vlad King and Power Loader being the main ones in front of her, Namuri couldn't see the intruder right away. Moving forward, she pushed past the two, trying to see who was responsible. Once the intruder came into view, she felt a hand grab her shoulder. Kneeling in front of her was Spinner, the villain tied up with Aizawa's capture scarf. Her fists clenched. She had watched Izuku's torture, and she remembered the faces of the League like they were the back of her hand. Not only their faces, but what they did to Izuku, and although this monster hadn't done anything she knew of, that didn't excuse anything. It was a fact that this scumbag watched the whole thing happen. Well, if this isn't a pleasant surprise. Nizu spoke from Aizawa's side while the man glared holes in the villain. Now then, Spinner, what is it that brought you to our school so early in the morning? Spinner did not say a word. He only looked to the teachers and heroes who surrounded him before he lowered his head. The League, I'll tell you everything they are planning. His answer caught many off guard, and opening his mouth, Nizu went to speak. And why is that? I find it hard to believe a consciousness can spontaneously form. After everything the League and I have done, I just can't anymore. Spinner eyes watered. What we did to that kid. Izuku Midoriya. Namuri spoke from the side, glaring at Spinner. After that Shigaraki and the others, I just want them gone before it happens again. Spinner lowered his head to the floor. The teachers looked at the villain with squinted eyes. None of them truly believed what Spinner was saying. Nonetheless, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Whatever they got from Spinner would be at least something. Eraserhead, bring him to my office and make sure he is unable to make a decision he would regret. Turning away from Aizawa, Nizu watched as the teacher dragged the villain away. Ectoplasm, Vlad King, and Hound Dog. Go with Eraserhead. At his call, the 3 heroes left with the underground hero. The rest of you make sure the campus is secure and do not let any students out of the dorms midnight. A moment, please. Before she could leave, Namuri was stopped by the principal. Standing side by side, they looked towards the school building. What is it, Nizu? Eri is waiting. I know, and like I said, this will only take a moment. Nizu paused. Aizawa had told what had occurred when the police had custody of Toga, how you had let your emotions take hold. I tell you now, without the others present, because this time I need you to control yourself. Toga at the time was our only lead, and I understand just how close this matter is to you, which is why I'll give you a pass. However, now that we will have Spinner in custody at U.A, I warn you that should you deprive us a lead on the league because of your actions, well, I don't think there will be a place for you among heroes. Nizu walked forward and towards the building. I will give you the opportunity to question Spinner after we obtain what we need on the league. That much I can do for you. Now get back to Eri. Nizu left without another word, and Namuri stood still. Her jaw clenched and eyes closing for a few seconds. God damn it. Opening them, she left back towards the dorm. In her heart, she hoped that this would be the lead that traced back to Izuku. The sun had still not broken the horizon, leaving only one light source within Nizu's office. The overhead white fluorescent lights initially threatening to blind the group before their eyes adjusted. Nizu sat on the gray couch across from Spinner. Behind his left shoulder, Vlad King stood, arms crossed over his chest. Behind his right shoulder was Aizawa, the man's fists clenched and eyes boring holes in their captive. Said captive sat on the other available couch, squished in between Hound Dog and Ectoplasm, while several clones stood around the room, making sure no unneeded interruptions could occur. No one in the group had spoken, and reaching across the small table in front of him, Nizu grabbed a mug of tea. Bringing it to his mouth, the animal slowly took a sip, eyes never leaving Spinner's. Lowering the cup, he spoke, Shuichi Iguchi, villain name, Spinner, quirk, Gecko. As if he were reading off a file, Nizu's voice was flat, portraying no emotion. You wish to speak with us? Well, again, I ask you why? Why, after attacking our institution countless times, after murdering a student of ours, why now do you wish to speak? It was a question everyone, especially Aizawa, wanted to know. The villain lowered his head, mouth opening slightly. I don't want the league to. Stop. Nizu raised his paw, head shaking. Stop with the lies. You aren't doing this because of a change of heart. You say you want to stop the league, but why now? Out of all the other chances throughout the year. Why now? Spinner opened his mouth to talk, but Nizu wasn't finished. Don't answer that, Iguchi. Quite frankly, I don't want to hear the excuses you have come up with to justify yourself finally doing something rather than nothing. What I am concerned about is the league. You have information you told us you are willing to share. So if that helps lessen the guilt you have or justifies your betrayal, so be it. Tell us what you know. Nizu wasn't here to play a game with Spinner. The league has been a thorn in his side since they first attacked. Why Spinner left the league? Not his concern at all. Besides, he knew full well that line of questioning was something Midnight would ask. Spinner sat still, his eyes looking to the table. For weeks, the league has been trying to establish a deal with a villain organization called the MLA in Dika City. This group is giant. Heroes, villains, and even civilians all answer to the same leader. Redestro. He spoke. Spinner realized it was useless to state his reason for doing this, especially when the animal already knew. Redestro. Nizu heard a similar name a long time ago, but that wasn't the most important part. If it was true that an entire city was under the influence of Redestro and the MLA, who was to say that it wasn't the case outside of Dika City? This is a problem. Nizu could handle a villain group, but citizens and heroes, if they were under allegiance with a villain organization, the list of heroes that could be trusted was shrinking considerably in his mind. His mind was already forming a plan when Spinner continued. There's also Shigaraki's new pets. Pets. Nizu looked to the villain, his questioning tone not going missed. It was when we were at our hideout. A monster showed up, claiming that Shigaraki needed to prove his worth in order for it to listen to him. It kept crying out the name All for One when we fought him, claiming Shigaraki was a weak successor. The room grew tense, and Nizu narrowed his eyes. Before the talk started with Redestro, we were also contacted by the doctor who made that monster. He brought us to a lab with a warping quirk. I didn't get a really good look at him, but there were nomas. They were unlike anything I've ever seen before. The situation kept getting worse, and taking a sip of his tea, Nizu shook his head, his right paw going to massage his forehead. A few months ago, he had been given a report that the giant encountered by Gran Torino had started moving after a year of slumber. The giant was already a problem they didn't understand, but now the pieces were starting to fall into place. Why it attacked Gran Torino and Neomesa. Why it freed Kurogiri from their capture. It was yet another apprentice of All for One. He would store that away for now. He needed more. Now, these talks you've been having. What exactly have the League and Redestro agreed upon? From the last time I was there, we were still talking about our next plans. During that, All for One kept getting mentioned. We also talked about who would lead the alliance between us, but other than that I don't know much. Spinner confessed, hands coming together to hold each other, finger laced over the others. Himiko Toga. Nizu began. The rat's brain was moving at speeds none of which the other heroes could understand. However, if this was going to work, he needed to know. Did she know about this? Confused initially, Spinner nodded. She did. Nizu returned to silence, lost in his own tortured mind. The other heroes could only look at the principal for the minute he remained still. Eventually Nizu nodded. Erase her head. Go retrieve Midnight. And stay with her when she questions Spinner. Ectoplasm, keep watch over him. As for the rest of us, I will be calling a meeting. As soon as Midnight is done, you are to report to the conference room as soon as you detain Spinner in an isolated area. There is much we must discuss. Aizawa had no other option to obey Nizu's command. The rodent already leaving the room before Aizawa could even step forward. With a sigh, Aizawa went to leave the room, his fists clenching, mind trying to prepare him. Her heels clicked across the tile hallways of Yue. Namuri walked side by side with Aizawa, dressed in her hero uniform, her eye mask highlighting the serious look she held. Aizawa too held a similar look. However, the reason was vastly different from hers. For him, it was far too much in too little of time. Izuku being Red Hood was still fresh wound. He hadn't even been given a few hours to come to terms with it before Spinner had shown up. This is a mess. The entire situation was messed up. So much so he couldn't even hear the voices of doubt that yelled in his head. The ones that screamed to believe somehow that Izuku wasn't who he knew he was. That Spinner knew something about Izuku that Toga didn't. It was an absurd instance of hopefulness that his logical mind knew was impossible. Taking a deep breath, Aizawa looked to his side and at Namuri. Opening his mouth, he tried to silence his thoughts. Keep yourself restrained this time, Namuri. Anything you do to Spinner now will reflect on Yue. I get it. Nizu already told me. I don't need you on my butt too. Namuri spoke rather calmly. Her eyes pointed forward. Even she knew that this wasn't the time to let her emotions take control. She needed answers, not a fight. If she had to bite the bullet, then she would. Spinner could hold the answer that Toga refused to share before she was taken. Their walk was short-lived when Namuri arrived at the door of Nizu's office. Entering, she saw Spinner, and her anger returned. Although Spinner didn't do anything to Izuku, he was still part of it. Calming herself down, she looked to the several clones of ectoplasm that stood at the nearby windows, watching. Nodding to the hero, Midnight took the place where Nizu sat. Unlike before, Aizawa moved to stand behind Spinner. Once everyone was situated, Namuri stared at Spinner. Taking a large inhale of air, she looked to the lizard man. Why did you do it? She didn't have to be a hero to know the basic reason why. Izuku was a thorn in their side. That would be a simple yet effective answer. But that same answer could be said about any of the heroes or students that have encountered them. They all did something to the League. So why was Izuku targeted? Why was Inko killed? And why was Eri threatened? If Izuku truly was a thorn, it would have been over as soon as they dealt with him. No, rather than that, they tortured him. She knew why, but she wanted to hear it from the mouth of one of the monsters that helped murder an innocent woman, helped destroy a young man who only wanted to do right by the world. Spinner knew what she was asking, and he had no reason to lie. It was Shigaraki. That whole message thing was a lie. Shigaraki had it out for Midoriya. He wanted to hurt the kid. The others, well, they just enjoyed it. When he thought back to those days of torture, he felt like throwing up. Sure, killing a hero or a hero in training is bad enough, but Spinner was sure it was unavoidable in the League's plans. What they did, however. So why didn't you do anything? You knew it was wrong, but you watched. Just because you didn't do anything physical to them doesn't mean that you are free of guilt. Midnight looked straight into Spinner's eyes, her entire body leaning forward with her palms laid flat on the table. Spinner knew why, but he couldn't say. He was scared, afraid to die in that god-forsaken warehouse with the Midoriya family. His silence had told Nemuri all she needed to know. The villain before her was nothing but a coward, a hypocritical coward. Afraid of death, but deals it out like it's nothing. She closed her eyes, another sigh coming from her mouth. She went quiet for a minute before opening her eyes. Now was the time to ask the real questions, the ones she really wanted to know. Where is Izuku Midoriya? The question caught Spinner off guard. What do you mean? He couldn't help but question it. Izuku Midoriya and Inko Midoriya were dead. They should know that. Spinner couldn't understand why Midnight would ask the question. We know that you have Izuku Midoriya captive. Where is he? Nemuri glared at the villain. Though in her stare, she caught the look of Aizawa. She had known the man for years. Even if she was angry, even if she had changed since Izuku's disappearance, she would always be able to tell when something wasn't right, especially when it came from him. Glancing at the hero, Nemuri quickly looked back to Spinner. The villain still genuinely confused. He's dead. He was in the warehouse. The video, didn't you see it? Nemuri stood from the couch, leaning even further until she was in Spinner's face. You can keep lying, but we know that Izuku Midoriya is not dead. There was no body, no remains. The only thing that makes sense is that League still has him, meaning you know exactly where he is. Spinner retreated into the couch. We never took him. He pleaded as Nemuri continued to pressure him. I watched Dabi light the warehouse on fire. He was in there. There was no way he could make it out alive. Izuku was broken, beaten, and exhausted. It didn't make sense to Spinner. How could they think he was even remotely alive? Even if they didn't find a body, it was Dabi's flames. He might have been incinerated completely. That's how the villain thought of it at least, but his answer wasn't the right one. Nemuri slammed her fist on the table. You and those monsters. Her calm facade was falling steadily. Just tell me where he is. Midnight. A warning voice came from Aizawa, the man glaring at Midnight. There you go again. Midnight's glare was directed back to Aizawa. Why? Why are you defending them? You were going to let Toga go. Now you're stopping me from even questioning this piece of trash? You don't care, do you? You never did. You're like all the rest. You wrote him off already. Aizawa clenched his jaw, going silent before he looked to Ectoplasm. Take him out of here. This is done. Ectoplasm went without resistance, grabbing Spinner from the couch, going to escort the man. Nemuri stopped the hero, placing a hand on the clone's shoulder. Don't you dare, Ectoplasm. We aren't done. Aizawa moved to the clone, prying Nemuri's hand away before pushing her away. Yes, you are. Go. Ectoplasm and his clones left, leaving only Nemuri and Aizawa in the room. The two stared at each other. Nemuri's fists clenched. You do realize he's the only lead we have. Aizawa only stared, saying nothing. Nemuri returned his stare before shaking her head. A dry laugh came from her mouth as she placed her left hand on her forehead. I should have known. Known that Shota Aizawa, the lone underground hero, would be like this. But I had hoped that you would care. Nemuri placed her hands on Aizawa's chest, pushing the hero back. That you would care for Izuku, like I thought you did. Hero, that title belongs to anyone other than you. She poked Aizawa's chest, the man's fists balling and jaw tightening. You know, don't you? I saw that goddamn look. Neo Mesa told you something, didn't he? He was listening the entire time with Toga. You know. She pushed him again, causing Aizawa's back to hit the wall. His eyes remained on Nemuri, his face stoic as he took a deep breath. I don't have time for this. Nizu called a meeting. He tried to move, but was pushed back into the wall. What did he tell you? Nemuri grabbed Aizawa's collar. Get your hands off of me. Aizawa gave nothing but a cold stare, his breathing growing faster. Tell me what he said. You don't even care about Izuku. But I do. I deserve to know. Aizawa closed his eyes before he took Nemuri's legs from underneath her, taking the hero to the ground. Don't say I don't care. He was my student before he was ever anything to you. It had boiled over. Everything that had been building up was exploding. Namuri stared at Aizawa before she kicked the teacher in the knee, causing him to fall to her level. Grabbing Aizawa, she placed the teacher in a chokehold. Her right bicep placed against his throat, while her left intersected where her right wrist was. Aizawa tried to pry Namuri's arm away from his neck. Namuri was relentless, pulling back on Aizawa's neck until the man leaned into her, loosening her grip just enough for his hand to pull her right arm away. Holding onto the appendage, Aizawa flipped the teacher over on her back and onto the floor. Raising his fist, he aimed for Namuri's jaw, intent on taking her out before things could escalate. He brought his fist down, making contact with nothing but the hard floor beneath. Namuri, having rolled out of the way, turned over, getting to her feet. Aizawa did the same. Facing off against each other, the two glared. Namuri rushed forward, hand going to her side and to her whip. Cracking it, she struck at Aizawa, the whip gouging the carpet as it headed towards him. He in turn responded with his scarf, the two weapons colliding. With her left hand, Namuri grabbed the collapsible fan she carried, and with her teeth, she ripped the fabric that covered her right arm. As soon as the mist of her quirk appeared in the air, Aizawa's scarf retreated, covering his face tightly, the man also holding his breath. Bringing her whip back, she swung her fan, the mist spreading throughout the room and towards Aizawa. Blinded, the man restricted his own air flow when his neck was wrapped in Namuri's whip. Before he could move to loosen it, an impact was felt against his body. Namuri, having thrown her fan and whip, held on to Aizawa, tackling him through the door his back was facing. Taking it off its hinges, Namuri sat on Aizawa, striking at the uncovered parts of his face. Aizawa blocked the strikes effortlessly, his arms only slightly aching at her hits. Slowly the smoke started dissipating, and so his scarf unwrapped itself before he coiled it around Namuri's left arm. Pulling it down, he brought his foot up, planting it in Namuri's stomach before he kicked her over his head and into the wall of the hallway. NGH. Namuri hit the wall with a thud. Falling to the floor, she quickly moved to stand. Eyes looking at Aizawa, who turned onto his stomach, was getting up. Before she would allow him to, she threw out her left leg, foot hitting his chin. Aizawa took the hit head-on, falling on his back once more. The attack did little damage, and soon he could hear the rushing footsteps of the other staff members. Moving his head, he could see several of his colleagues running towards them. Turning his attention back to Namuri, he could see the woman slowly standing in pain. Getting back to his feet, he already made the decision to end the fight. Kicking off the ground with his left foot, he raised his right knee. As the distance closed, Namuri dodged, only narrowly avoiding the knee that buried itself in the wall next to her. Namuri glared, but before she could retaliate, both she and Aizawa were stopped. Holding Aizawa, Cementos lifted the man off the floor. He didn't even try to resist. Namuri, on the other hand, was grabbed by Vlad King, the woman kicking her feet. "Get off me. What the hell is this about?" Vlad yelled, holding Namuri back. "Aizawa, tell me what he said." Aizawa said nothing, not even when the rest of the heroes looked at him. "You're a coward. It's easier to think he's dead, isn't it? You don't care. Not about Izuku. Not about Eri. Not about anything." She kept insinuating the worst. Aizawa, however, had already regained his cool, not giving in like he did before. "I can't." He couldn't tell her. Not what he knows, not what Naomasa has told him. Not until he talked to Red Hood himself, and especially not until Izuku made his decision. "Namuri, just shut up." Namuri stopped struggling in Vlad's grip. The tension between the two was indescribable. It was hard for the other teachers to remember the times that these two were once friends. No one said a word, and soon they escorted both Aizawa and Namuri to the conference room. There they separated the two on opposite sides of the room. Nizu looked at the two as the rest of the teachers took their seats. "I would fire the two of you right now." Nizu began glaring at the two teachers. "Fortunately for you both, the situation at hand requires you. As I learned from Spinner, Dika City is under the influence of a villain organization bigger than any we have faced before, called the MLA. They are in cahoots with the League, who as of late have come into contact with two of All for One's acquaintances. Not only do they have access to nomes of which their abilities are unknown, but the same giant encountered by Gran Torino nearly a year prior. The League and MLA are currently conspiring with each other. We must move before then." "An entire city?" Cementos looked to the animal, who nodded. "Heroes, villains, even citizens are banded together." Snipe leaned in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "This here is a problem. Which heroes can we trust? There's got to be more of MLA members within our ranks. That's only part of the problem, Snipe. Our biggest concern is All for One. All Might spoke from his chair, chills already running down the spine of the hero. If it's true Shigaraki has met two of that monster's friends, we must concern ourselves with what their next plans are. That is where the MLA comes in. According to their talks, All for One is mentioned quite often. Nizu looked to the two. I believe it's safe to assume their next plans would involve something of ginormous magnitude. That's why we must take advantage now while they are still separated. So going against villains are one thing, but we will also be facing an entire city. Present Mike shook his head. It'd be hopeless. Like Snipe said, we don't know how many heroes are in the MLA who don't reside in Dika City. Normally, that would be the case. I agree. Nizu nodded at Present Mike. The situation would indeed be hopeless. However, Himiko Toga knew of the deals with the MLA as well. Cementos nodded. So you assume Red Hood knows of Dika City as well? Red Hood is hunting the League. That much was made clear when he waged war with the illegal trade and the subsequent mutilation and public display of Toga's corpse. If he learned of Dika City, I have no doubt he is there already. What are you suggesting, Nizu? Aizawa spoke in a low tone. First comes Tartarus. Security will be tightened, and every eye will be on All for One. Second, we get the Hero Association to blacklist every hero based in Dika City. Of course, that only fixes part of the problem. If they attack, we won't be charged for any crime. At most, that covers our backs. Third, we leak the information to all Dika hero agencies that Red Hood is there. That will spur them into action. Finally, using the heroes I trust, we entrap the city. Taking the League is our first priority. However, Red Hood is just as important. Capture any member of the League or Red Hood. If things get too dangerous, we retreat. Sir, about Red Hood. Although he could be trapped in the city by the members of the MLA, his identity is unknown. He could leave before things escalate, and we would be none the wiser. We can't realistically track anyone who enters or leaves Dika City before we mobilize. What incentive do we have to make him stay? Ectoplasm brought up a valid point, many nods coming from the other staff members. Nizu paused. Well, we currently have one of the members of the League within our custody. As a deal of freedom, we have Spinner act as bait. Red Hood is intelligent. Most likely he is already gathering information necessary to his goals. So we send Spinner to Dika City in 3 days, of course not empty-handed. We'll give him files on some of our more outdated security measures of which will be upgraded before they could make use of it. If Red Hood is watching, which he will be, he won't be able to stay still. Between being hunted within the city and knowing his targets are there, he'll have to choose. If he chooses to escape, we apprehend him. If he doesn't, he chooses to wage war openly. The conference room grew silent before Nizu looked at the group. Whether he wins or loses, Red Hood will be trapped. So, this was the end of part 3 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.